Good evening or good day, dear viewers, and a very warm welcome to today's series Visit. And at this point I would like to thank you again for all your numerous letters, questions, and of course also comments and tips and words of thanks for this series. That makes me pretty happy, and I'm always very grateful when I can be here and enter into a dialogue with you, even if one-sided. But today's show I would like to put under a problem that may give a little clarity in many things. Many of you write to me that they are very grateful that they learn to understand different illnesses better, and that they are grateful that I am very committed to naturopathy. And at this point, I believe, there is still a need for some explanation. I am not committed to naturopathy, but I am committed to life and to people. And today we are the fourth generation alone. That's not very long. They say a generation is about 30 years old. We are only the fourth generation, with the vision, farsightedness. It used to be with limited knowledge, but a doctor's knowledge and vision was like space. It was known that when a person falls ill, they falls ill in their life. There is an imbalance in what they really does for themselves within the framework of the movement. They do not give this aspect of the movement of the body the importance it needs in order to fulfill its vital function, its stability to maintain its activity. It was known that illness is also a sign of malnutrition. Now you can go back centuries. Of course there was a very base diet that always consisted of what you had. But you knew that illness that develops in a person has something to do with it. Illness was a sign of imbalance, of being overwhelmed. One tried to understand things, tried to relieve the body through very simple means. Back then, the so-called gout, an excessive increase in the protein requirement, uric acid settles in the joints, the population didn't have that. Those who were up there who had slaves working for them, the kings, the emperors, they had all that, because they didn't move, they only sat and ate all day. That wasn't really the disease the people had. They could also eat a bacon sandwich because they worked hard. They put it into practice in everyday life. I wonder, and all of us, we're really just a blink of an eye in history. Why have we lost sight of all that, what disease actually means and what disease is? It actually goes back to the fact that by the end of the 20th century, and I'll take the USA now as an example, because Europe, Western Europe, always orientated itself toward the Americans, were naturopaths, healers, homeopaths, also spiritual healers, herbalists, trained physicians. They were very highly regarded, because of course they used their knowledge to help people realize things, and explain things to them. Because they had developed tools that enabled them to use things also from the kingdom of plants and nature in the context of becoming ill. These are sciences that have been developed over centuries. And then there was the aspect that medicine actually means healing by the spirit in Latin. In other words, for centuries people have always understood illness, that it has something to do with the soul, with the psyche of the people, with the burden that people carry. Whether this was the loss of a child or a serious illness in the family or money worries and hardships and fears and wars. But you have also faced these problems and these things, and simply recognized this imbalance. And when I say early 20th century, then what I mean to say is that these things really have all been forgotten. And of course there is a reason behind it all. For it was 1910 in the United States that the American Medical Association published the Flexner Report in 1910, funded by Rockefeller. And it was the birth of medicine that now relies on the existence of certain algorithms. Algorithms that say this is an illness and this is the pill. And that's a different illness and that's a different pill. And that's illness and that's the pill. And that belongs together and it has to be like that now. And so this form of medicine has been given a completely different focus. So you have developed an algorithm and no longer asked yourself why. Now it was no longer important to ask what happened in your life. Now it was no longer important, now it was important to have an illness. And you all know that when we define high blood pressure, we doctors know what we have to do. But why? Blood pressure has incredible causes. High blood pressure simply attaches itself to that person's life. And it is not a professional claim today to bring a person back to a normal blood pressure process. I'm going to take all of that as a single example now. But the campaign and the denunciation means denouncing what has been developed for centuries has been put into the interests of an industry. And I don't want to be misunderstood at this point. I'm in a generation that has benefited from the fact that today we don't have to let a person die with an acute appendix. We can do great things. But this so-called evidence-based medicine, which works according to these algorithms, it bypasses life and it also bypasses people. And when I stand here today at the age of 63 and see the commitment with which I tried to start these studies, because it was a heart's desire as a child. When I see how I was trained, when I look back how I had to learn these causal structures in my freshman year and had to learn how an organism works, then it is conveyed to me more than something that follows laws, regulations, or an order. But I haven't been prepared for real life. What I have learned is to follow. I have learned that I should and must do it because there are these algorithms now, that as a doctor I am obligated to treat a blood pressure in this way. And what I really noticed was that all the training courses regulate themselves because they are funded. A doctor who sets out to identify the causes. To understand the connections, to get hold of more and more instruments, to find causes and solutions, to educate people about what is in their hands and what they need to change. This is not respected, it is still sometimes arrogantly smiled at today. And what makes me incredibly happy and where I feel great gratitude is to be allowed to have this valve here. And I know that it's not just people watching this program who are affected, that it's interested people who are very interested to develop a larger worldview that is controversial to a medicine we see as the holy of holies. The petroleum-based medicines consist of medicines, which, with respect and responsibility, should make us think twice before prescribing them, or whether we might prefer not to prescribe them because they have potential in itself to create an imbalance in the human being on the other hand. I call myself a biological doctor, and I don't choose the expression alternative, because a medicine that takes care of causes is not an alternative. Who is the alternative anyway? Isn't a medicine an alternative that tells us in this process we might no longer return to complete satisfaction? I'll give an example now. A really very elderly person who is no longer able to change many things in their life, who can no longer take the steps that are now necessary. It's really a blessing to give them a blood pressure medicine that protects them from a stroke. But we always have to think carefully about whether we need something like this. And for me, we're in medicine today at a very, 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 and you all use this word every day. We only have symptomatic therapy. And symptomatic therapy doesn't clear anything up. I can remember that as a doctor I was always required to present my conventional medical certificate. The normal or the family doctor or the specialists must deliver so-called points so that they retain recognition as specialists and as part of their necessary further training. It's all funded. This is all a dialogue between an industry representative and the doctors. I understood that for myself and would rather make 2 or 3 home visits in the evening instead of that. I didn't need to. I wanted to understand. So why is the 500th blood pressure medication better than all the 499? That raises questions, and we doctors simply don't ask enough questions. Hence my appeal to young doctors: do not smile at colleagues who deal with these questions. Try to get in touch with colleagues too that open up your vision a bit. I also appeal to the medical profession that we integrate with one another, in caring for one another. And that we don't behave in this partially arrogant way toward the patient, but also value us as colleagues. Because everyone at their point is very important. And everyone in their place has a task for people. But what should no longer do, in my opinion, is that we give specialization the right to have the highest acceptance. Because the doctor's view has really become as small as an electron microscope. And I'm still a bit under the influence or under the feeling of the book I read by Jeffrey Rediger. Jeffrey Rediger is a psychology minister, an American. And he wrote a book about the unbelievable cases of remission in the world, who were healed, and the book is called, Healed, Researched on Tumor Diseases. For the first time, a doctor has researched what happened to these people who got well and they didn't do any more of the things you believe to do now and immediately. We have been treating tumor diseases as specified in the guidelines for over 70 years. And we know so incredibly much in these 70 years. What is a tumor? How can it develop? What is the tumor biology like? Why does a cell metabolize differently? It needs 18 times more sugar. What is the task of hexagonal water, the cytoplasm? Every tumor disease is a mitochondrial disease. Why do people have to wait another 200 years for maybe new generations of doctors to develop? And why are we still standing where we were decades ago? Why do we treat illness and pretend to research it, but we don't really do it? We just look at the fact of now, but we don't question. And Jeffrey has worked out very nicely that any tumor disease always comes into development when people have been under permanent psychological pressure. This sets off an unbelievable cascade of stress. And when it is exhausted, something changes in the body. So this connection between a weak and a strong immune system. This mindset, this in its intellectual encounter, approach to life in its behaviors, in its ways of thinking, in its beliefs, you, human, are the key. This regulation, that stress is the highest fire accelerator, also in the development of tumor diseases. And that only the feeling of connectedness. This trust in me and my strength, in the constellation of people trying to let go, away from any medicine, were treated, metastasized and were healthy. And I don't understand as a doctor that none of this interests us in medicine at all. As a doctor, and I don't want to put myself in the foreground here at all, as Petra Wiechel I am the smallest light, but I am allowed to meet people who are suffering from illness and are beginning a great journey. And I'm allowed to accompany them, and I'm allowed to experience, and maybe I'm allowed to experience things that others don't experience at all. And I would just like to be able to address this with this show today, that you understand how important it is that you all realize slowly, this paradigm shift that is necessary that we do not have again. For more generations with power and with might, and you all know right now that it's thinking something different, feeling different, expressing something different, seeing it differently. It's not that easy to find partners in medicine today who understand and who look deeper. And I would like to ask my colleagues that we do not consider ourselves as gods in white, and that we are always on eye level with these people, who should expect from us what we owe them. And that we all slowly demand a medicine, which starts again with things, with naming people and not diseases, and believe that we have to offer the same solution for everyone. Unfortunately, we are not getting any further, and we are left with 70% chronic illness already today and don't know very much. I don't know where we want to start to really clarify and solve these things. I'm just delighted and grateful that we as naturopathic and biological, complementary medical colleagues open all doors to all other colleagues, join hands, and that we also offer this view to our future physicians in our training courses, not just up and in detail, but we should open up in depth. In that sense, it was very important to me today to tell you this. And maybe you can understand each other better and better when you know how the other thinks and what their concern is for what we are here again and again today and also discuss in these programs. With this in mind, I am really looking forward to next week. Whenever you have questions, need advice, and I can help. Sincerely. Please send your email to visite@qs24.tv. Thank you for sharing all of these shows too, and on that note, a wonderful week to you all, and I look forward to next Sunday. Goodbye.